Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody else out there that's listening. My name is Pauline Cordiner. I am a storyteller from northeast of Scotland, and as you'll see, we're outside today. We've been all cooped up, so I thought I would tell a wee story that shares some of the joy that I'm saving up for being back in the great outdoors once this is all over. I thought we'd go back to a bit to my roots, and I don't mean the bits beneath the red, because you know 2020 is going to be the year that we all know each other's real hair colour. I started telling stories at a place called Archaeolink about 19 years ago, and it was where you could go to learn about the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, the Vikings, the Picts, the Romans. I didn't do that in order, but you know, never mind. Now, I've got to say that the main character in this story, her name is Mary. Not a very authentic Pictish name, I have to admit. But the first time that I actually told this story, there was a wee lassie in the audience who was five, and my name's Mary, and she insisted that the hero be called Mary, and so it has stuck ever since. And I've been telling this story since 2003, and I hope you love it. It's actually, I've been had a request that I tell this story, so here we go. Once upon a time, a long time ago in Scotland, the land was more or less covered in trees. In those trees, in a deep dark wood, there was a village. And the village had a great big fence that went all the way around it with just one gate. Now, this fence was made out of tree trunks, this thick, and the tree trunks seemed to stretch all the way up to the sky. Well, the reason that they were all barricaded into this village, because a village it was, and there was maybe about 4 or 5 roundhouses and sheds and chickens and goats and wee sheep and all the rest of it, was that outside the village in the great big wide world there was a giant. And for generations this giant had been grabbing anyone that should dare to stray past where he lived and eat them up, and he would grind their bones between his teeth. Occasionally cows would go missing, sheep, pigs, anything that got let out to graze, because that's what the big gate was for. They would let the beasts out to graze. They were lucky they had a well within the village for water, but the animals had to get out. Vegetables and other crops like wheat, they grew inside the village itself. Now, one day Mary was bored, and I'm sure there's a lot of adults out there looking after children, schooling from home, and they've had a lot of "Mom, I'm bored. Dad, I'm bored," and that was just what it was like for wee Mary. This day, Mary, who was 7 years old, went up to her mum. "Mum, what can I do?" And Mum said, "You can go and collect a bunch of herbs to help me dye this wool." Well, she collected a few herbs, and that was it. She was bored. She was off. And then it was off to Granny. Granny, what can I do?" "Oh, well, I think you should go and look after the young ones," said Granny. Well, she went and looked after the wee bairns for a wee while, but then she was bored. And then it was off to Dad. Dad was the blacksmith. "Can I help? Is there anything I can do?" And he said, "If I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times. This is a dangerous place. Get out of my smithy." And she was sent away. And it was then that Mary noticed that the big gate to the village and this great enclosure fence was open, just wide enough to let a wee 7-year-old girl through. And I've got my daughter here with me today, haven't I, Molly? You want to say hello?
Hi.
Well, she sneaked out, and the second she was out of this village, the village she'd always been in her whole life, the village that nobody went out of, only the animals went out to graze, she was amazed. The grass was green, the air was fresh, the trees stretched all the way to the sky, and it was beautiful. There were flowers which she could smell, and she could hear the sound of water, the sound of a wee stream tinkling away down the hill. And it was towards that stream that she ran. Now, she got down to the stream, and in the stream there was a wee brown trout She got in, she watched it, she was amazed, and she paddled, and it was so much fun. And it was then that she heard this noise. It was a low, deep, rumbling noise that seemed to shake the ground. What could that be, she said, and she'd gone down the wee valley, paddled across the stream, and now she was going back up again, and she found herself standing looking down on a great gorge. And in that gorge was the giant. And he was fast asleep, and he was snoring, and that was what was shaking the ground. She could see his big feet at one end, underneath a waterfall, with a squished sheep in between them. She could see his hairy legs, his breeks, his great big fat belly, and she could see his head, his mouth opening. Huge, the size of the biggest cave you can imagine. And then she looked back at his belly. It looked bouncy. It looked like a trampoline, although they weren't to be invented for another 2,000 years. It looked like she needed to jump on it, and that was what she did. She leapt from way high up on the side of the gorge, and she plummeted down and boing off his belly. Boing off his belly, and this was so much fun. Boing off his belly. Now, Molly, if you were a giant and there was a wee 7-year-old girl your size jumping up and down your belly, do you think you would wake up?
No.
Yes, you would. He woke up. He opened up first one eye, and he came to a bit, and he opened up the other eye, and he looked down his belly, and here was this tiny lassie. Boing, boing, boing. As he woke up from his slumber, he said, "I see you down there, bouncing up and down on my belly, and now I'm going to catch you, and when I catch you, I'm going to eat you up." And he pointed to her with a big finger, and he said, when I eat you at last, I will grind your bones between my teeth." And she screamed, "Ah!" And she immediately started clambering up the side of the gorge until she got to the top, and then she started running full kelter all the way down that hill through the wee burn, and she ran up the hill into the village, and she shouted, "Help! The giant's chasing me!" And at once everybody stopped the jobs that they were doing. They put their things down and they leapt up and they said, "What? But we're hidden in here." "Not anymore, we're not," said the chieftain. I can hear him coming, and right enough, the ground was shaking. As the giant ran across the land, following Mary to the village that had successfully been hidden behind that fence and in that forest for years. And he cried out, "There you are. Now I see all of you, and I'm going to catch yous, and I'm going to eat you all." Well, luckily, the chieftain and Mary's dad, the blacksmith, had a plan in motion. And what they had been doing for the last few years was every time there'd been a bit of spare fibre, maybe flax, maybe nettle, they'd been twisting it and winding it, and they'd made this great thick rope. A rope long enough to easily go across the width of that big gate, and they swung the great big gate open, and they stood one at either side. They were giant, great big, huge men, and it was lying snaked on the ground. And then they said, "Mary, this is your fault, so you go and stand in the middle of that village and you do this. Na 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 na." And she went, "Na na 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 na, na 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 na." And here was the giant coming running up the hill with the ground shaking. And he came running towards the village, and he saw Mary, and he went, "There you are, I'm going to eat you up." And just as he ran into the village, up came the rope, and he tripped and he went flying, and he landed crash in the middle of the great big communal fire in the village. Now, these poor people had been trapped, so it's nae feeling sorry for this giant and what's about to happen. He'd been eating them, he'd been a tyrant. They hadn't seen the outside world in generations. So what would you do? What would you do to that giant? Well, he was starting to get up, and the chieftain said, you know what? I've had enough of this giant. I say we go for it. And they could only reach his leg, so that's what they started to chop at. And his middle thigh, they took their axes. And I know that at home, you have all got imaginary axes, so they picked up their axes and they went, how did they go, Molly? Chop, 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 and oh, they cut off the giant's leg and it was bleeding everywhere. And he said, you may have chopped off my left leg, but I'm still going to catch you all and I'm going to eat you. I'm going to bite you and I'm going to grind your bones between my teeth. And he was trying to get up and Mary shouted out, oh, what about his other leg? Come on, we've got to stop him from escaping. And they got their axes and they went chop, chop, chop. Chop, and oh, they cut off his right leg and he was in agony. He was lying on the ground, but he managed to raise himself up on one arm and he said, you may have chopped off my left leg, you may have chopped off my right leg, but I'm still going to catch you and I'm going to bite you and grind your teeth, grind your bones between my teeth. And by this point, he'd raised himself up so you could see this great big belly that he had. So, what are they going to go for next, Molly? They're going to go for his belly. That's right. And they all got their axes, and get your imaginary axes at home and join in. And they went chop, 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 chop. I can hear my neighbour joining in. And soon he was lying on the ground and his intestines might have been spilling out. Oh, don't worry, parents. There is a point to this. But he wasn't giving up. And he said, you may have chopped off my left leg, chopped off my right leg, hacked me in the belly, but I'm still going to get you and I'm going to eat you all up. Well, he was lying on the ground now. And they could see his big white neck. And they thought, right, this giant gets everything that he deserves. And they got their axes, and Molly, what did they do? They went chop, 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 and eventually the head rolled away from the body and stopped moving. And after all these years, it was so quiet and it had seemed so easy. But finally the giant was gone, and what would you do? What are you going to do when all this is over? You're going to have a great big party. There was a wee boy. He was about 9 years old and he had a stick in his hand. And he went up to the giant and, you know, his head was off, but he just wanted to check, and he went poke, poke. And it was then that the giant opened one of his eyes, and then he opened his other eye, and the wee boy went ah! And the giant opened up his mouth and he said, you may have chopped off my left leg, chopped off my right leg, hacked me in the belly and cut off my head, but I am still going to eat yous. Every one. What would you do now, Molly? Well, they took their axes and they started chopping them up into hundreds and hundreds of little wee bitties. They went chop, 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 chop. And eventually, here were lots of manageable, bite-sized pieces, about that size of giant, thousands of them, scattered everywhere. But the giant was gone, and now it was all over, and they could have a great big, what? Party. And they were happy, because now life could go on like normal. And just as they sat back and took a deep breath, they heard not one voice, not two voices, not even 3, not even 10, but thousands. One voice for each lump of giant, and those voices went, "You may have chopped off her left leg. You may have chopped off her right leg, cut off her head, hacked us in the belly, and chopped us up into lots of bits, but we're still going to get you, and we're still going to eat you and bite you." So what could they do then? To be rid of this pest forever. And I'll tell you what they're going to do. I'm sitting here next to my fire. There we go. They made a massive, great big bonfire. And they started to burn that giant. They needed wood to burn him. And what did they take down? They took down that massive, massive fence that had kept them prisoner for all of those years. And they burnt that giant. They burnt him for 3 days and 3 nights. And eventually there was nothing left but a wee pile of ashes. The chieftain didn't dare to say it, but things had gone so quiet that he said, "Now is the time. We are going to have the biggest party anyone has ever heard." And everybody cheered. They got out the mead and they got out some food and they were all ready. When, now that that great big fence wasn't all the way around the village anymore, the wind could get in. And the wind blew in. And I don't know if you can see it now, but it whisked up just a wee bit of ashes from the fire. And the ashes flew round. And the ashes started to land around the people. And then people started going, "Ow! Ah! Oh! What was that?" And the ashes started to bite people. On the nose, on the arm, everywhere. Even on your bottom, Molly. And then they heard it. Not just one voice. Not 1,000 voices. But millions of them. "You may have bitten off her left leg. You may have chopped off her right leg, hacked us in the belly, chopped off her head, chopped us up into thousands of pieces and burnt us for 3 days and 3 nights. But we will still eat every one of you." And ladies and gentlemen, they did. People were being bitten all over. People are still bitten over to this very day. Because ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and abdi else, that is where midgies came from. So you see, you've learned something today. This story has been for anyone that's stuck indoors. It's been for all of my storyteller friends, including those on Tag Team Tales, and I'm hopefully going to have a new story to share with you soon. In the meantime, goodbye!